No, he is the PowerPoint. Okay, let's come on back and settle into our seats.
Going into the star day 2012, we will know another existence that we have.
It's part of the ongoing endeavor to bring a diverse amount of information here. We've heard from every sector, and now we're about to hear from an even different perspective. As we know, the information that's been coming through for the last several years has brought in new layers of unpeeling our ancient backgrounds and perhaps our potential futures. But one of the things that's been brought up again and again from the beginning is that several individuals have stepped forward and they've offered revelatory information from their personal experiences that has really shocked the world, the so-called whistleblowers. And one of the most prominent names in recent history, since 1997 anyway, is Colonel Philip Corso, whose book, The Day After Roswell, which was a compendium of his experiences from what he knew and then going back into history and revealing some of the information that's been prevalent and hidden from us on a public basis. And he reached a point in his life where he said, well, I'm going to let it go. I'm going to let it all out. And it totally shocked the world in many, many cases, and included shocking his own family. His son, who grew up an army brat, basically, and living his life as a mechanical engineer and going along nicely, and suddenly his father comes out with this book that rocked the world as we know it. And it changed his life as well, just to be affected by that. Of course, Colonel Philip Corso has passed on, but fortunately, his son has taken up the legacy. He's taken up the cause because there's still more information that was left behind in form of notes, which has subsequently been made into an upcoming book. And these are some of the interesting stories that he'll also be sharing with us, as well as opening up the floor to questions with some of the things that he knows. But it should be very interesting because I understand that he will also bring in his father's essence as part of a channeling experience. So please welcome, if you would, Phil Corso Jr.
Is this on? Aloha. We took a ride around the island today on a Harley, my wife and I I just tell you, it's a beautiful place. You ought to try it. Not on the Harley maybe, but a lot of friendly people, and the terrain is beautiful, and we really are thankful to be here. I wanted to start off for about the first 15 minutes explaining how the book almost never was. I think most of you, I guess, have read it. A show of hands of who's read the book, and then I'll understand better. Okay, very good. That's about half of you, I guess. My father, before 1992, if I ever mentioned UFOs, which was a favorite subject of mine, he would flat deny and say that I shouldn't be bothered with such things. I'm going to go back slightly further than 1992. Go back a couple more years, and I had a very good friend that was named Captain David Shear. Captain David Shear was a tall, thin fella, black belt in karate, very exceptionally good in defense. David also could read the Chinese, I don't know what it's called, of the eyes, to where he could tell your respiration. Pardon me?
Iridology.
There you go. Yeah, iridology. And he was very good at it. He would take people that had that were very sick, and he would purge their bodies for about 3 months on special juice diets and such. And most of these people really recovered from being quite ill. Anyway, we were sitting and having lunch in Denny's down in Lantana, Florida, and I always was quite upset at my dad about him taking away my UFO pictures that I took as a kid. And he would constantly deny these pictures, that they were phony, don't show them to people, don't bother with them, and such like that. My wife can confirm that because it became a very sore subject. Well, one time when we were eating this dinner, Dad got up to go to the restroom, and I was questioning him about my pictures, where they were. And he always said, well, I gave those to Gene Dixon, you know. And I said, well, get them back, you know. And David says, you shouldn't talk to your father that way because his respiration just went up to so-and-so and his heart rate and so-and-so and so-and-so. And he could tell just by looking at his eyes. So I knew my dad knew something. Anyway, in 1992, Father was sitting there. I ran a little business called Marine Electronics Wholesalers. And Dad would sit behind a desk while I went out and worked on yachts and installed electronic gear. Once in a while, he would snap up from behind and stand there like this and say, yes, sir. And President Reagan would call him on the phone, and I wouldn't believe it was him, but it was. And he would ask his advice mainly on Russian affairs, since Dad did actually start Colonel North's job, or originated, and that was chief of liaison between Chief of Staffs and Capitol Hill. Dad would sit there behind a desk, and I said he would be bored. And I said, well, why don't you start writing your memoirs? He did. We shopped his memoirs, which is now we call The Day After Rome, but it's never been published yet. And we shopped these for 17 turndowns. Nobody's interested in a colonel's, you know, war careers or otherwise. It just, we were told war movies are not popular. It's not what Hollywood's doing now. George Knapp, a ufologist in Vegas, he saw one of the books that had been sent out trying to get this published. And he noticed one paragraph in the book that says, when I was in R&D between 1960 and 1963, I saw UFO material and put it out to the public and stuff. And it was just a very short blurb in a paragraph. So George, of course, George Knapp, you know, bang, that was his subject, and came back and says, can you elaborate on that and start sending us more material? Well, my dad is one of the very strangest people I've ever met. And he had almost total recall in photographic memory, and that's what made him such a good intelligence officer. So he began putting almost all of these facts together without any notes. And he's so good at it that when he would speak, I would tell him, Dad, tone it down. You don't have to say what color tie that guy had on 25 years ago, you know. And but that's the way he was. And so anyway, the book, you might say, evolved. And it came, a producer named Neil Russell picked this up in Hollywood. And Neil, he hurried it. And the book was actually put to Simon & Schuster through Bill Birnes, the co-author of the book. And it was done so quickly that my dad didn't have a chance to proofread it. There was no legal done on the book. And most of you people that have published books will realize that a legal is very necessary to have done on a book. Simon & Schuster was afraid it would be squashed if they didn't, bang, rush it out. Fastest book they've ever printed and got out to the public. The first part of the book had foreword by Senator Thurman down here. And boy, was that a mess, let me tell you. He was coming home from Neil Russell's place in Hollywood, and I got a phone call from Senator Thurman's administrative assistant. And he says, we're going to sue you, we're going to sue your dad, we're going to sue everybody. And I said, well, what for? And this was a woman. And she was saying, well, I'm because your father did not have Senator Thurman's consent. Well, it ended up that not only did he have his consent, but he even sent back the second time when they changed the name to The Day After Roswell, and the original book was called A New World If You Can Take It. In other words, that's where the came from, and this is called The Dawn of a New Age. Now, Senator Thurman ended up saying that not only did he give my dad permission to put the forward in there, but so he fired his entire staff, administrative assistant, all the way down and through. Simon & Schuster decided to take it out just to not embarrass the good senator and keep that kind of quiet. Enough years have gone by now that I feel you can know about it. Dawn of the New Age. Now, this book, my dad was really very upset about it because it has a lot of Hollywood in it. And like I said, he did not proofread it. In his words, he says the first 2 chapters aren't worth a darn. You shouldn't even read them. They put them in there just, I guess they figured that would sell the book because some people don't know what Roswell is or meant. Dawn of a New Age, that I had no intentions to put out this book. This one here is all in my dad's original handwriting. Part of it is in typing and part is in handwriting. And what it really is, it's the original notes. And the original notes, without Hollywood involved, is what the people really wanted. They don't want it edited. They didn't want it. It reads like a textbook. In other words, it's a manual. It doesn't have. It's not exciting, except for if you're interested in the subject or the field. Then it becomes very exciting, because there's so much left out of this book because of that. Dad went through the day after Roswell and was yellow lining everything that he didn't say and didn't like, and he got halfway through and quit because it was impossible. He had almost every page blacked out. Dawn of a New Age, this began, and it was published in Italy. And the publication in Italy is, you might say, was not exactly... It shouldn't have been published in Italy. Let's just put it that way, not to embarrass anybody, because it's all been settled. And out of that came something very good. Paula Harris found a person in Mexico that wants to publish the book. He now has made a contract with Corso Holdings, which owns a stack of materials like this that my father left behind. By the way, I hid those in an attic of a friend of mine for 3 years, because we had so much trouble over this book. I don't want to go into too much detail over it, but all I'll tell you is there was lawsuits by people we didn't even know. And now one of my partners in Corso Holdings is the attorney that got us out of all that free of charge. So we're very beholden to him. In today's society, if you get off in the wrong direction or you start stepping on toes, the way that you're silenced is with lawsuits. And let me tell you, they do silence you, very much so. They not only silence you, but then the next method that's used is a personal attack on your finances. And if that doesn't work, then there's a lot of gifts given to you. Yeah, I've built airplanes that people don't even pick up. And we get people from the White House and so on and so on and so on. Very prominent people. I will tell you this. I don't want to talk about being threatened, but they have their way of letting you know what you should do and what you shouldn't do. And it's not just through lawsuits. It's through this I call it as a system of shutting you up. Be careful out there. Anyone that is publishing on the subject matter, today they may not attack you directly because I think they're busy with a war, but they will put you under observation. They have other ways too, with the remote viewing and such like that they can cause a lot of problems to you and your family. I have 3 sons that work with me in a business. They do not care anything about the subject matter. They'll deny it. They'll tell me to be quiet and not say anything else. It's not so much that they're afraid, but they have actually been witness to the vans that pull up in front of our hangar, a bus, and it's one side is completely loaded with electronic gear. I go out and knock on the door, and there's a black gentleman in there named Daryl. And I said, look, if you're going to take pictures of me, you might as well come on in the hangar, and come home for lunch. You can use the bathroom facilities and such like that. And he did. He came home for dinner, and he gave us the pictures that he took, and he invited me in, and he says, we're just here for your protection. Okay, great. And so once in a while I say to myself, well, is all this real? Does it really mean anything? And then I start thinking about him, and I start thinking about at 40,000 feet with a CIA agent in my face, going out to Burt Rutan, walking into Burt Rutan. By the way, he's the father of composite aircrafts. He just went to space, the first civilian to go to space. He's a very prominent person, and I know him very well. And when I walk into his building with the CIA agent, he actually gets up and runs, because he recognizes the guy. Calls me out. We run around the hangar a few times and hide from the guy, and he says, Phil, do you know who that guy is? I said, of course I know who he is. He's here to protect me. Oh, yeah, sure. Anyway, enough on that subject, so be careful. I had a whole thing prepared, and I'm not going to do it that way, because I have been told, without any knowledge of it, that I've only done 2 other conferences. One was the X conference in Washington, D.C., 2 years ago, I guess. 3 years, okay. And then there was the original Fort Walton Beach, which was a disaster. I had some CIA agents that infiltrated me as a friend, took the hangar next door, started building an airplane, going to put everything up on the website for me. I was going to put some of it up there free. Website closed down in 2 weeks, a whole bunch of material stolen and taken, photographs, everything, okay, out of there. That was, and they even admitted also who they were, but they took the material anyway. I think that what we need to do here is, I was told in these first 2 conferences that it was more like my father speaking than me speaking. I'm even starting to look like him. The cheeks are hanging a little bit, and the tummy and such like that. So what I'll do is, I think it's much more effective for you to ask questions. Now, I do not know anything. I am not a ufologist. I don't know anything about abductees. I don't know anything about if the world's going to come to an end, if the meteors are going to hit us and such. So if you ask me that kind of question, I'm just going to be truthful and say I don't know. What I would like you to do is stay with the book. And I know some of you don't know what the subject matter is in the book, but I think you'll pick up real quick. Basically, my father between 1960 and 63, with General Trudeau, my father was in charge of foreign technology branch. Now, foreign technology means Europe and the rest of the world, but it also meant anything outside of the world. And General Trudeau trusted my father very much. If he said he would appropriate a research, it was done automatically. My father didn't even need to ask his permission. He spoke for the good general. He was recruited for the job, and basically they put out supertenacity fibers, which I work with every day, the carbon fibers and such that shoot Kevlars. They put out integrated circuit, which he had the very first one in his hand. Bell Laboratories went overnight from the transistor, which was an Earth invention, by the way, to all of a sudden having thousands of transistors on a little tiny chip so small that you really could hardly even see it. A chip that is about so big with all the little legs on it, as you probably know, black and plugs in. But the actual electronic part is a dot in the middle, and it's too small to handle, so they put it in his case about 20 times larger, where at least the machine can handle it and plug it in. American Computers, which was formerly Westinghouse, had just invented the miniature test tube. So the miniature test tube, all of a sudden Westinghouse found themselves out of the electronic business. American Computer nearly folded. Now, what does this mean? This means unfair economic advantage brought on by E.T.'s help. In other words, his technology. This is something that needs to be addressed if the civilian part wants to take care of UFO retrievals. Because if a company would pick up on this, they would instantly become a world conglomerate. Probably 200 years advanced over where we are now, because that's what my father and General Trudeau estimated where we are right now. We're 200 years ahead of where we should be. It's a different timeline. Russia came down. He and General Trudeau, my father, used to sit and laugh at the Russian inventions, he said. They would try to put an SST up, or they would try to put a space shuttle up. They would imitate ours, and it would look like one on the outside, but it didn't have the electronics, and it was a joke. The same with the aircraft. The aircrafts that defected, the MiG-15s that defected to Japan, they were made out of steel, and they had the miniature test tubes still in them when we were already in the computer age. Fiber optics came out of this. My dad said he held the first ones in his hand, and he says they didn't know what they were. They thought they were some kind of wire. But we haven't quite got there yet, because when he closed his hand around it, it began to glow. So it has something to do with the biology of the body. The same thing with the night viewing. The night viewing originally was the lens. The little gray has a lens that peels off, and he has two more lids underneath. He has the eyeball and then another protective lid, such as a shark has. And he would hold it up in the hallway, Dad said, and the first time they saw green images of people walking in the backgrounds and such. Now, did they give this material out? No, they did not. They would go out into the civilian market. If someone was working on night vision, whether it was a military like Fort Belvoir that was funded by them, or if it was a General GE or whoever it was, they would not give them the technology, but they would see how far they already got. For instance, the first laser, as you know, probably, I guess many of you have also seen the recent History Channel hours that was made on my father's technology. The first part of it was very good. The second part debunked it completely. But that's all right. That's controversy is good. It sells books. Wonderful. Keep it up, Stan Freeman. They would send this material out. They would fund the companies that had already started working on it. The first laser is as big as this stage. Within 3 years, it's down to a pencil size. Now, what they would do is they would fund them, and they would tell them that it was possible to make a laser hand size. Then, if they began to flounder or fumble or not make it, then they would bring the artifact to them, let them hold it, let them see it, let them research it, and then take it back. So it wasn't reversed engineered that the artifact was thrown in their lap and say, go at it, boys. It wasn't that at all. Here's the most important part. Since they wanted to hide this from Stalin, and my dad felt that we were greatly infiltrated at the time, Stalin's dad says number one mandate was to steal Roswell technology. And the way that they hid it was, not only did they tell them to invent the thing, but take credit for it, take the patents for it, and run with it. Now, think about this. Dad says that only 10% of that technology ever got into our civilian hands. Who has the rest? Well, he says part of it is just probably fumbled away and gone somewhere. The other part is the Air Force. And the number one person that my father was against was Secretary of the Air Force. Because they hog the material, they keep it in their own little brain pool, instead of putting it out to the world's brain pool, which is much larger. And they do it just where they can have superiority over the other services. How stupid. Don't you agree? Okay. Now, let's start at questions. And just go ahead. Ma'am.
Hello, my name's Deborah Warren from Kelowna, Canada. The question is not about the book, but around the publicity that happened at the time of the book's release. I've always been intrigued that they gave it kind of a straight-up interview, and then at the very end, I can't remember if it was ABC or NBC that did it, then they started to interview him, and your father started to talk about time travel and timelines, and they used that as the opportunity to write him off as a nut bar. And that was kind of like the bookend of the interview, and it's like, okay, you don't really need to pay attention to anything that's happening, going on here.
Correct.
Move along, folks. Is there anything, it intrigues me because I just finished reading Daniel Pinchbeck's book, 2012, The Return of Quetzalcoatl, and it's about the change in consciousness that's coming to us right now is really about a changing relationship to time. And so it seems like this is really an important thing for us to be aware of at this time.
Yes, it is, and boy, were we upset about that. I mean, the family, we climbed all over poor Granddad for saying that, and we warned them not to. We wanted to keep it credible. We didn't want anything said about his ET encounters and such like that. Go back to 1997. Times have changed quite a bit. You're absolutely correct. I only do a conference like this every 3 or 4 years to see the difference. And there is a difference. And you people are amazing. I mean, every one of you is educated in the subject, and I haven't found any one of you that is saying things that are just totally off the wall. Everything that you say is logical, and I'm interested in it. Everyone that I've talked to. For that to stop, the media does it to create sensation. And I don't think they mean to discredit the media, but Dan Rather and such like that all belong to Skull and Crossbones and such, and they might mean it. There might be a few in there that absolutely do mean it. And whenever you're interviewed by anybody like that, make sure that you have the ground rules down. And they did discredit us quite a bit that way.
Additional information you'd be able to share at this time? Because I found that the most fascinating part of the interview. It didn't really get started until he started to talk about that stuff. Is there anything you'd be willing to share with us now that he might have shared with you?
There's tons of stuff. I don't even know where to begin. Yes. I would come home from building my airplanes, and I'd be all full of fiberglass, not dressed like this, believe me. And I would sit on the floor beside my dad because I couldn't sit on the furniture. And I said, "What'd you write today?" Because he did live with us the last, what was it, Liz, 3 years? Yeah, the last 3 years when my mother passed away. And he came and lived with me and my 3 sons and my wife. And I would tell you, "What'd you write today?" So he would write stuff, and then the argument would start. And I'd say, "I know Einstein better than you, and he didn't mean that way," you know, and such like that. So yes, I know my father's subject matter more than what's in the book. Absolutely. Any particular item you would like to know about?
Well, it's the aspect of time travelers that he was starting to talk about in the interview, but they kind of shut it down.
Yeah, he had an encounter in the desert, and I guess it was the very first Men in Black. Actually, he called them Range Rovers. And what these guys, they were military. They were military men, though. They were a division of, I guess, the CIA, MPs, and everything put together, NSA, such like that. So what happened was my dad was flying back in one of the little puddle jumpers because he moved from White Sands up to Red Canyon. And he was flying back, and he saw let me go back. On his radar, he saw something doing 3,500 miles an hour in 1957. And they followed it until they thought it hit the ground. So he, the next day, was flying back, and he saw a shiny object on the ground. He didn't want the pilot to know what it was, so he told him, "Turn around, bring me back up." And he got in a staff car. He went out in the staff car and found the thing alone by himself with his gun strapped on his side. And he first sees the craft stuck into the side of a hill, the same as the Roswell ones are pictured. But it was injured, he knew, because it was fading in and then fading out, he said. And then it would fade in, and he figured that he was hallucinating because it was so hot in the desert. So he took a piece of tumbleweed, and he threw under it because he figured when it faded back in, it would crush it. And then when it faded back out, he would see it crush. But that's exactly what happened. Then he went up and he touched the thing, and he said it was cold. And then he turned and looked into the cave that was beside it, and that's where he's had the encounter with the New World, if you could take it. He asked him, friend or foe. I guess you've heard the story said here tonight. I can talk about that story now. I mean, mentally, I can talk about it. Back in 1997, if you would have asked that question, I would have said I didn't know a thing about it and gone on. Not that I had been hushed up, but just because it was embarrassing. He got afraid. He came out, got back in his staff car, The creature asked him if he wanted to come aboard. He said no, and that's something I just can't imagine. I would have said yes, and I think most of you would have said yes too. And he says then I guess it wasn't injured as bad as he thought, and it came up, or it had been there overnight, and he repaired it or whatever. I'm just guessing, I'm just speculating. But he said when it took off, it folded within itself. He says it whoop, and then threw a donut and gone. So that's basically, he backed his car up and he wrecked it. When the staff car, he actually spun it out and wrecked it, and the engine stalled and everything. That's how afraid he was. So it was not exactly, I guess, a pleasant encounter. He later told Dr. Olbert, which I hope I'm pronouncing his name, one of the German scientists that worked with von Braun, rocket science. He later told him about it, and he told him, he says, you're a magnificent person if they chose to reveal themselves to you. And he was very impressed. And he said, we also have had such things happen in Germany before the war. So the UFOs, yes, they did have one. Germany, they did have one. And that's where their superior, you might say superior knowledge came from of war vehicles and such. They had far more than what the public knows about, too. So
if I could just clarify, is that he felt that it was a time-related incident because the vehicle was appearing and disappearing. He didn't interpret that as being interdimensional or phase shifting or anything?
Well, you know, I don't want to get into the details of what time is and time travel, because Lord knows that's one of my favorite subjects, and you wouldn't get me out of it. But he knew enough about such things, even at the time that it happened, that's the way he interpreted it, okay, as a time-traveling machine.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Yes.
Hi, Phil. I have a question about time, too. I, in April, spent 3 weeks with a really exceptional contactee, Hector Palacios, down in Mexico. Mm-hmm. He's been having contact for about 40 years, and long ago started talking about the Earth being taken out of its time stream. And then I heard that at the X conference 3 years ago, you brought up this issue and that your father had information on this topic. So could you talk a little bit about what the ETs told your father about the Earth being taken out of the time stream in order to protect it, and then that it would be inserted back in?
I don't know anything about the Earth going in and out of the time stream, but what I can help you on possibly understanding a little bit about time. First of all, Dad said that we have had time travel for a long time. The Philadelphia experiment did happen. It did not happen as Hollywood said it happened. And Dad actually had the report, and I was fortunate enough to see it in my hand. Remember, he had the power to declassify a report. So that was pretty neat. So he declassified the report. I had it in my hand, and he also said that this was not a fluke like Hollywood said. Actually, Einstein worked on it, and Einstein was just as much a part of that as he was the atomic bomb. Now, the time travel of the Aldrich, that was the ship that they used in the very beginning. It was for the purpose of not moving the ship. That was an accident, and it did happen, because we didn't have very good control, and we didn't understand it too much in those days. The German mines, they had a magnetic mine, and it was coming up. It would wait till the lead ships would go over, and then the second, third, or fourth ship, it would come up in the middle, and not just get that ship, it would get the whole convoy almost, any ship that was immediate around, because they huddled close together. It was going to wipe us out. So Dad worked on this project, or knew of this project. He had the briefs on the project, and it would actually move the mine about 500 yards through time out to the sides as the convoys would pass over. And it was very successful. And it's done with counter-rotating magnetic fields, the same way that the ship is built. He told me it was made out of 6 layers of skin, and each one used a counter-rotating. And there is a frequency for the Earth, and he left me that. And I also have been fortunate enough, or unfortunate enough, at the Walton Beach. It was a complete bust. I thought it was the most horrible thing I had ever done in my life. I didn't like it. I didn't like the people. I didn't like anything that went on. But the next day, I just happened to walk back in, and there stood a man that I met, and his name is Phil Bailey, and he's ex-Air Force in charge of black projects. And he clued me in that I better cool it and be careful. And he's still a very dear friend. But Phil let us know that that time travel within the Air Force has also been one of their priorities. And he introduced me to a man named Mr. Beckworth. Mr. Beckworth owns he's a millionaire, and he builds transformers, and he built them for the Aurora project. He works with the military very close, and he was very much a part of the time travel of the Philadelphia experiment. Now, we were tricked by Phil, because if he had told me where I was going, Liz and I wouldn't have gone. So we walk into this room, and there's a long table about from here to the end of the stage, and there's all these people sitting there. And I go, well, what's going on? Well, you sit here at the head of the table. Okay. I go along with this, And funding men from the Pentagon, religious people, so on and so on and so on, sitting at this table. And I figure, what do they want? Well, they wanted to know about time travel. What they got out of me was absolute zero at the time, because I was not talking. And I found out that I had an ability at that table because I was so upset that I didn't know that I had. I literally could hear every word they were saying in their heads. I don't know why. I don't know why it came out there. Maybe it was one of them. Maybe there was a remote viewer. Maybe there was a religious psychic. I don't know what it was. And I finally told him, I said, Mr. Beckworth, you know anything about the Hopi Indians? And he says, oh my God. He gets up and goes in the other room, and he's friends with them, every one of them. He has paintings on the wall, such like that. So he takes me in another room and shows me a little time travel machine. It's not time travel. This was a machine that he wanted introduced to all universities where people could understand time travel. And it's very simple. You started it up and it disappeared. And he has notes written on it and such like that. It will never happen. Not in our lifetimes. That's what I believe. So, yes, there is time travel. Time travel is not that difficult to achieve. It's been achieved through nature, accidentally. And by the way, it's very important to know, E.T. comes here, my dad says, for the atomic bomb. And my dad was very good friends with Olbert. I mean, with, who's the... yes, right, that's it, Oppenheimer. He was very good friends with him, and he says this. He said, Phil, this is my dad's words. I shouldn't even say that. He's speaking. He says, Phil, we should have known after the very first atomic bomb test that when that mushroom cloud went up, there's a focal point that comes down through the center of the Earth and comes out the other side, and it completely destroys our magnetic environment. It goes all the way out to the Van Allen belts. And they also, even though they didn't know string theory, and even they didn't know, but they knew there's other dimensions, and they said they figure that the missing mass, see, at first they thought they were going to blow up the whole Earth, first atomic weapon that went off. They just weren't sure. But they found out after the first test that there was missing mass. Well, the main part of the explosion takes part in another dimension. And that's what ET's upset about. Not that takes place in our space. Our space is a terrible place anyway. We have pulsars and we have all types of objects running out of there with tremendous energy, and it doesn't make any difference if another little pea falls into the pot. But in the other dimension, it's very disturbing because we don't know what's taking place there. The Air Force has a lot of trouble right now because in time travel... See, I told you not to get me started. The Air Force has a lot of trouble with time travel. And it's not that you go back and the paradox of killing your father and because you return to another. First of all, man cannot travel back in time. That's what the little clones were for. Now, there's another race that no one has talked about, and that's the clones that created here on this planet to be sent back in time, because man, we do not know how to travel through time yet. We instantly die. And they've tried. And the Aldrich was part of the terrible experiment. And yes, it did happen. Dad says they were in the metal and such. But here's what the Air Force has trouble with. In order to travel through time, it's not like an airplane, that you get in an airplane and you go from point A to B. You must have a purpose. And it must be a benevolent purpose. Because if it's not, you come back with all types of baggage. Now, who comes back? The little clones come back. Dad says one part of their brain, there's two brains separately, not two hemispheres. One is laced with integrated circuits, it's all in here. The other one is the brain for the little thing to navigate and move around with and apply as energy. Now, you say back engineering. Boy, is it a two-sided sword. Have any of you seen the movie Star Trek V, where he goes back and gets the whales and they bring it back? Okay, and Scotty's sitting there and he needs the matrix of plexiglass made up, and he's sitting there and he cracks his knuckles, and he says, oh, how quaint, you have to type, rather than talk to the computer, And he's typing in the matrix for liquid, for clear aluminum. That's what it is, transparent aluminum. And Sulu's standing there beside him and says, the prime directive, you're breaking it, Scotty turns to him, well, how do you know he didn't invent the damn thing anyway? And that's what reverse engineering is. How do you know that we didn't make the craft and send it back anyway? Because everything today, I assure you that I know more about this than anyone on the planet, except for the military, that it's possible within not too much longer to build the craft and send it back to that time. So, how do you know that we didn't do it anyway? Now, that boggles the human mind. You say, are we caught in a time loop? And you start all this thing and that. Everything that you know about time is wrong. Everything. Time, to explain it in a nutshell to you, it's digital and it moves sideways. Everything that takes place in this universe is taking place simultaneously right at this moment. Everything. Your birth, your death. No such thing. You already know that. Now, we are such limited beings that we see ourselves as moving from birth to death. Well, we also know, and everyone in this room knows, that there is no death. You just simply are transformed your energy into another dimension or another state. And it's pretty much up to you what you want to do with it, how well you achieve. And that's why I say benevolent travel. And they did have trouble at that table with their travel. Their travel has run into trouble. And they are in trouble because they lack good pilots. Play on that word for a minute. Good pilots. Okay, more questions. I got to get off the subject. Did that answer anything or help?
That got the ball rolling in a great way.
Thank you. Thank you.
And
yes.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
you know what? We better go to the speakers.
Yeah, we need to come to the mics. There's two mics set up here.
Then that way it takes it in order, and I don't choose.
Just one more short question about time.
Okay. I'm doing like that guy channeling last night. Why am I doing that? Stop that. I didn't believe in that.
As
Okay. I'm going to sit down. Okay, Dad? They kicked me. Maybe I got a lot to learn, Yes, you got to rearrange the camera. Yeah.
Yeah, just back to the Roswell incident. I understand from your lecture at the X conference that apparently there were craft observing the Trinity test in July of 1945, that we were testing the Trinity test, and there were 2 or 3 craft. I know there were like 4 crashes in New Mexico in 47, but that those craft are on a different timeline than we're on, and something having to do with that first Trinity blast that most of the scientists thought it would get into the atmosphere and destroy the Earth, that they were observing that crash, and something blasted them out of the sky from that. Mm-hmm. And on their timeline, it might have only been 10 or 15 seconds for them to crash to the ground, but on our timeline, from July 1945 to July 1947, mm-hmm. in our timeline, it took them 2 years to actually hit the ground. Is that the right...
Well, it's you got the right idea, but I can tell you exactly how it happened because my father told me, and the military knows this. The craft came through in 1947, but it also came through in 1957 in Corona, and most of the debris field was left in Roswell, and the craft was actually left in 1957. Yes, so basically what you're saying is absolutely true. And what brought it down? I don't think anyone in this room, really knows. I mentioned it maybe long ago at the Fort Walton Beach, but I'll tell you again, my father told me what brought it down. They had an extremely powerful radar that locked onto the Nikes and the Nike Ajax, and it was pencil beam. That's how concentrated it was. Big test tubes, computers that were data pods, Dad said, that were non-electronics, and it was very crude stuff, so it was very high-powered. And when he would aim this thing at an RCAT, which is the drone that they fired their missiles at, it would actually bring it down. So my dad, you hear that a lightning storm was taking place that night that the ship came down and all that type of hooey. But actually, they know they brought it down with their radar locking onto it. Yes.
And was there an actual crash in 45 too, or did it just...
No, 47 and 57.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. Now, think about 57. Put the pieces together. What did my dad see in the desert?
Yeah.
What did he see?
The craft.
The encounter.
Okay, now I'm giving away to jelly beans now, but yes, we know my father knows just about everything. And was he kind of put into these positions and chosen into these positions and such? Yes, but this is a peace conference, and I would really like to tell you a few things about my father through his career, real quick, if I may, and then we'll go back to the questions. I just thought of this, and I think he wants this brought out. My dad began as a dirt soldier, drafted. It's in the new book, too, and I find it very interesting because I didn't know this. He had such a high IQ, 180-something in those days was pretty high. And when he scored on a test for his draftee, they said, "Come here, son, we're going to make you an officer now." So anyway, he goes over to England, and he did so well. We had no intelligence program at that time, so they put him into the British. What is that, Paula? Help me out. M14. Yeah, he went to Cambridge University and learned how the British, and they would say how green our ally. Dad would always say that, So anyway, he came back, went to Fort Riley, Kansas, where he saw the EB bodies in the casket. Now, Dad was not in Roswell. That's what I want you all to know. He was not a part of Roswell and retrieving it and such like that. First ones he saw was in Fort Riley in the little boxes, and he headed up and began and founded our intelligence schools there, because we had none even after the war. So then he went to Korea and he became intelligence officer for MacArthur. And since he had the photographic memory, he interrogated 2,000 prisoners himself. MacArthur sent him up and put him on the Panmunjom peace talks. And Dad says they were characters. He says every time he would come in raise his flag, he would make a flag an inch taller than theirs. The next day they'd come in if theirs an inch taller and the flags were growing on the table, And Dad said one time he walked in and sat at the table, and he says they knew he had them, and they were ready to sign the peace treaty. And because the prisoners that he would interrogate, he would take everything as being true. and then disprove it rather than try to make a decision that it wasn't true. And they knew how to defeat themselves like most enemy did. Make a long story short, they dropped a torpedo with a time delay. They couldn't blow up the earth dams that held the rice back because they were a quarter mile wide and such. And the delayed torpedo for shallow running would run into the earth, and then they plant 10 or 12 of these things in there and they blow. So anyway, the war ended. Now, not just because of my father, because there were thousands of men there, but he was instrumental, and he was the first Army officer ever to be put onto the Air Force targeting board during that time because he was so well at picking the targets from the interrogation. So Dad did that for peace, and I think everyone should know. The next thing he did for peace comes years after that, to where my dad was, since he had Colonel North's job and was on the White House staff with Eisenhower, as liaison between Chief of Staffs and Capitol Hill, he was in charge of interpreting U-2 photos. So when the photos came through, he saw the missile silos for Cuba on there, took it to Bobby Kennedy. Bobby Kennedy, Attorney General, says, my brother's up for election. Put that back away. So Dad was pretty slick at the time. He had like his own little secret covert army, you might say. There was a lot of maladjusted people on Capitol Hill, and he instantly recruited them all. And so he made a deal. He made a deal with that it went on Kennedy's desk after it was released. A friend of his named, what was that name, Dad? Frank Hann released it. Took the report to Gene Dixon. Gene Dixon released it to the newspaper. The FBI came running into Gene Dixon's and was going to arrest her and said, "Where did you get this information from?" "I saw it in a crystal ball," she said. So actually my dad could be tried for treason probably for such things. I mean, it was a very hot subject. Luckily we weren't at war, and luckily that it wasn't traceable back to my father. But just think about it. If the Cuban Missile Crisis had not been released, like Kennedy didn't want it released. Now that's the part of history no one knows. And that's why we will not print the book the day after Dallas. It just will not happen in our lifetime. There are still 50 people alive that it can be embarrassed by it. And Dad was Senate internal investigator for Senator Javits that investigated the Warren Commission, which investigated Kennedy's death, and it's still classified, and it will remain classified for the next 50 years probably. So anyway, enough said on that subject. I will never speak on that subject again. That's as much as I will say on it. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just had what Oprah calls an aha moment. I have been losing keys that just disappear from me, and other objects too. I know they go in a sixth dimension. I just got that the planes are, wherever they go, is the sixth dimension.
My father's, you're very good, because my father speaks of the sixth dimension in the book.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I was just told.
Yeah, if it's not
channel, you channel your father, you channel all kinds for information, and it's being brought to your fingertips. We all channel.
Well, probably so, because I just lost a very important paper, and if the gremlins didn't get it, it's in the sixth dimension. And I'm not making jokes. You could be right. You could be absolutely right. Well, it was meant to bring here, and I promised it. Can I mention your name? I mentioned I would for him. It was I forgot your name. Tell you the truth. Pardon me? Paul Halyard. Yes, Paul. I'm so sorry. Names I have trouble with because I give my own names to people, and I almost said it. So it's a good name. I do that all the time. I'm terrible with names. But anyway, it disappeared, and I don't know where it's at. But before I came here, I opened up Dad's black bag, and there it was on top. And I don't know. Maybe I'll find it again. Yeah. So anyway, those things do happen. Yes.
Just a quick question on the time. if it's hard to go back in the past, is that same prohibition or difficulty occur going to the future? And at least from my conception, how do you go to the future, and how do you know which one, and how does it exist if it ain't here yet, and so on and so forth? Where's free will?
Yeah. Well, you don't need to go to the future, because if someone comes back from the future, it's the same thing. They're going to bring the knowledge with them. So according to Einstein, relativity theory, you can only go backwards. You can look back into the Big Bang, and it's still there, and so is our Earth. But remember, our Earth is moving through space at some 350-something thousand miles per hour. So we're going into new territory all the time. Another part of time travel that most people don't think about is I have an infinity with machines. And it says that in the book, too. My dad mentions, and he says to General Trudeau, I think my boy's nuts because he says engines talk to him. Well, I can tell a motor anything. Liz can anything that's wrong with a motor, it just instantly pick up. Even if the car's in front of me, I can tell. It's just the way that I was born that way. I wire airplanes and have no idea how I did it. Well, that's not true. I did it because I have already done it before. So, we're all born with all the knowledge we ever need. God could not create you any less than what He is. You would not want your children to be any less than you. You want them to be more than you. So, this being said, every time you read a book, you're not learning anything in that book. You're learning how to extract the information from your brain. And it's there. Now, you might say, well, science says the neurons haven't been put together, and on a baby they don't come together to a certain age, and dot. They don't know diddly about the brain, believe me. Because the brain, first of all, there will be no travel in space, Dad says in the book, too. You cannot travel. And NASA knows this for a long time. And I dubbed the word friendly space. Friendly space means within the magnetic field of the Van Allen belt, which is 22,000 miles out, and the field of the moon. They have never once, NASA, sent an astronaut outside of the magnetic field because they know, Dad knew, General Trudeau knew, it's instant death. The brain cannot, as soon as it moves out of the Earth's sphere, it's like a light switch. Out, finished, all she wrote. So we will never travel to the Mars. We will never travel anywhere. It will not happen. NASA now talks about, I saw you squint your eyes, and I got to go further with it. NASA talks now about putting 6 feet of moon dust to shield. Now, man will travel when he gets field density device, which is anti-gravity, which is artificial field, which is a self-contained entity within itself. And do I know how to build it? Absolutely. Did Dad was he in contact with world-renowned scientists, and they figured out from the Roswell craft how it worked? They knew far more about that craft than can be imagined. And yes, it's there. Yes, it's possible. And yes, it probably will be done. And like Scotty, yeah, maybe I did invent the damn thing anyway. So we'll find out. It's very interesting. But I take it with a grain of salt. If it doesn't happen, that's okay too. I go back to building my airplanes and make lots of money, and everything's happy. So next question.
Hi there. Hi. I heard your father speak at Ramtha School of Enlightenment some years ago, and my question for you has to do with technology.
Goody.
Ramtha basically has said that the spacecraft of the future has nothing to do with metal or anything so antiquated, but is about a membrane.
Absolutely.
That it is a membrane that is alive.
Yes.
It is an extension of our mind.
Yes.
And we are the pilot, and it is a self-protecting system.
Yes.
That no one will get anywhere unless they're consistent with the consciousness to be there.
Okay, reverse engineering, and you're absolutely correct. Did I cut you off?
No, my question is, do you know from your father anything? Can you elaborate more on that?
Yeah, I'm so excited to elaborate that I cut you off. I'm sorry. Yes. In fact, I work with advanced composites every day, and I just made a new de-icing stall strip based upon the technology that my father left. And it's highly successful. We're making our first $1 million and everything's great. My sons are back at the hangar building them as I was here. And we have a patent on them, and we have an STC with the FAA on them, and it's highly successful. And it is putting current through the skin of semiconducting carbons with special resins and such like that, with metals involved. Now, I also get Composite Magazine, and I read some of the latest stuff that's being done. Right now we have tubes, and these tubes have the matrix of what we would call DNA, but it's not DNA, it's the matrix of molecular structure, and the tubes are grown, and they're going to use them to make giant domes with, and they're self-healing. So yes, we're already there. See what reverse engineering does? It's the darndest thing. Yes, the ship, my dad says in the book, as soon as the little EB came out of the influence of the field of the ship, he began dying. He was propagated on the electromagnetism of the ship in the revolving 6 layers of fields. Yes. So is the ship alive? Time will tell. Yeah. I would say that if, okay, Dad. The integrated circuit, Dad says, when he and General Trudeau had the first one, the charred chip, they knew right then and there by touching it that it was a living entity. So your computer that you throw on the floor and you burn up and such, you better watch it because someday he might get mad at you for doing such a thing. Yes. And you know, anyone that works around the equipment knows that they interface their minds with that computer because they're putting their minds into it. Also, a real quick theory here that maybe hasn't been talked about. The person, let's say that a bunch of group of men invented the television set. I'm going to just put this in real general terms. Say the television set is set back to caveman days, okay? And the caveman have everything there that they need, a generator, the alternating current to 60 hertz, and they plug this in, and they click the thing, and it doesn't come on. Why doesn't it come on? Does anyone know? Well, no, you have broadcast on the DVD and everything. You have everything you need that would be in this timeline to make it come on. But they click it and it doesn't come on. Well, here's the reason why. The minds that created that television, now the minds that created that television are not there. So it doesn't work. Now the Earth is not finished evolving. It's an egg. And the embryo is still growing. The technology is only just here within the last 50 years to make that television, which my father saw the very first one at the World Fair in New York. Okay. And so right now the ship, the technology to make the ship alive is coming. The Earth hasn't evolved that far yet. Now, what evolves the Earth? Of course, we all know it's us. We evolved the Earth. So the ship will be an extension of us. Yes.
So what you're talking about is group consciousness?
Absolutely. Yeah. And they had a group of EBs within the ship. There were 6. But you mean group consciousness of the entire world?
Well, the caveman example that you gave,
yeah.
The group consciousness didn't exist for the television to work?
No, it's that the people that made it with their minds, that invented everything, because at that time the Earth had evolved 50 years ago enough to make television. Could television be made prior to that? No, because all the matrix were not there from those people's minds that invented the television.
So how's that different than group consciousness?
Well, what do you mean by group consciousness? I'm lost. You mean the sum total of every 6.5 billion people on Earth?
Yeah.
Yeah. Group consciousness is very important, but remember, each group wants a different thing. You certainly want something different than somebody that's planning a war in Pentagon right now. So, group consciousness is many groups. Yeah. Yes, collective consciousness. If there's enough, the Earth is flat if everyone says it's flat, and that's the way it is. If everyone says the Earth is round, then it's going to be round. Next, it might be triangled next year, but it matters. It matters what everyone thinks, if that's what you're saying. Yes, it does. Most definitely.
I often feel that way about airplanes. I
Yes, and the men that put... When I'm building an airplane, I got to stand again. Am I messing your camera up? When I'm building an aircraft, at a certain point, it becomes alive. And I don't know where that point is, but it's just all of a sudden it becomes a living entity to me. And I love it. I love it as much as I love my wife. She says I love my cars more. She goes, but that's a man thing. You just have to be a man to understand that part of it. We like shining and curves, and we'll rub the women once in a while, but, you know. Yes, sir.
This question is a time warp question.
Time what?
Time warp.
Time warp.
Warp, okay.
Okay. You mentioned God a few minutes ago and said God didn't create us in such and such a way. Correct?
Yes.
In your father's experience with this different type of encounter of reality, did he become an atheist, or did it affirm his religious belief? And what is the role of religion in all of this?
Well, it's very big in all of this. Very big. If you noticed last night when the fellow was channeling, I got up and asked a question, can I have one of his ships? And he said, come get it. Then I asked him if he was a pilot, because if he's a pilot, you know, he should bring it to me. But anyway, I didn't go that far. But yes, I said benevolent. In other words, time travel has to be benevolent. And was my father religious? My father was very, very Catholic. And I remember as a young man seeing him opening up his little tiny book and reading it every single night. Then he quit entirely for some reason, for years. When he came back to live with us, my wife and I were then riding with the Christian Motorcycle Association, and we were, you might say, into religion, hunting for religion at that time, let's say that. And I told my father that I think he should. I said, Dad, I always appreciated you for what you did by reading a little book, and he started again. So, yes, my father died as a religious man. And I will tell you this, I've never said this before, but you bring up the subject. The night my father died, I'm going to tell him, okay? He said he died that morning, and when he came out of his room, he had drawn a picture. And the picture, I knew instantly what it was, because he taught me to communicate when I was just a baby. And it was a picture of the Shroud of Turin. So as soon as I saw it, I said to the next question to my dad, I said, was Jesus in your room? And he said, yes. And he also said that I'll be back when he died. His last words out of his mouth said, for me to go to work and that he would be back. I've never said that before.
Yeah, the reason why I brought that up...
We couldn't say it before.
Yeah, the reason why I brought the subject of religion is because the ancient scriptures of Hinduism has all the details on these flying UFOs.
My dad talked about them all the time. Yes, the Vimaris.
Yeah. So I think in exopolitics, if you can project into the future, I don't know who, after each of the world civilizations rises and falls, and I don't know how long America can stay at the peak, at the top.
We're past it. A democracy has never lasted over 200 years.
Exactly. If you look at history, all the Roman Empire, the peace of Rome and Britain, so forth, there is going to come a time when it will be replaced.
Yes.
And if India and China and other countries emerge, and it's economically in that direction, these ancient scriptures will come back again. That's why I wanted to know.
Well, my father, every night when he would go to sleep, when he was living with us in the last 3 years, I would go in to wake him up, and he'd wake up with a smile, kind of a strange smile on his face. And I said, oh, you've been at it again, huh? Where'd you go tonight? My father was one of the number one. In fact, he helped Al Puthoff design remote viewing. He was very strong at that, extremely strong at that. So at being an intelligence officer, it helped a lot. He did a lot for peace, and he did it mentally, with his mind, a lot for peace. Yes, he was the strangest man I ever knew.
Okay, I'm going to put myself on the spot.
Okay.
Here a little bit too with you. I think you hit the nail on the head when you said it's all happening simultaneously. And I think that's where the confusion comes, because we try to interpret everything happening simultaneously and order that information along a timeline. And that basically what I was told is that we take in the logarithms and we convert in our brain, we're this information field, and we take in logarithms and we convert that into what we consider four-dimensional space, and that these other off-world beings are doing the same thing, but they create other fourth-dimensional space through these algorithms, so it's not really dimensions at all. At least that's what I was told. I don't know what your idea about that is, but I think the confusion that comes in is that we're trying to discuss. We got one foot in one world and we got another foot in another.
That's
world.
a good analogy. My father used to say that about me. He said I was really stuck
over there. And that's why it's
confusing.
You know, in the constantly occurring space that we're in, you're talking to your father because he still exists.
Yes.
Simultaneously, at the same time, you're trying to talk to people here that are in fourth-dimensional space in terms of fourth-dimensional space. So we go back and forth, and it's confusing sometimes.
It's confusing all the time.
All the time, yeah. It comes and goes. It comes and goes with me, but you know.
Well, we're limited beings, and because we're limited, when you do infinity, that's why it lays sideways. It's a crazy 8.
Yeah, but this is like, the way I understand it, it's like we're in one great thought that's existing at all, existing.
I might be able to help.
Okay.
If the tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear it, is there any sound? It's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. You know, who cares? If there's no humans, the universe is not aware of itself. So it doesn't matter that it exists. So do we matter? You're darn right. We matter a lot. Are you supposed to know how powerful a being you are? You're God, and that's who you are. And do you realize that? No, we don't realize that. And this fellow that was channeling last night, actually, he made a lot of sense, and it scared the heck out of me. But yeah, that's basically. I mean, that's what. This is not me. This is Edward Casey speaking. You know, and if you read on him, I think he has one of the best analogies of what existence is in one of his books than anything there is. Basically, there's more pins, there's more atoms on a pinhead than there are grains of sand in the world. That's a huge number. A gagon is a 1-inch letter around the circumference of the Earth, squared. Square that. That's a big number, you know. Now, there's something more than there is even of that, and that's time. Time is infinite. But there's only so many souls. You create so many souls. So what happens as these souls reincarnate? Each one has the chance to play number uno.
Yeah, I think what's happening to us is that we that have created the mess, if you look at it on a timeline, we who have created this mess, we have all participated in the creation of the problems that we have today in prior lives, if you want to do it out. And so we're back now to correct the imbalance so that we can all move forward, both ourselves here and the off-world folks, because we're not separate from them.
Yeah.
And that we're executing a plan. We're executing a plan in which people have been embedded throughout all society, and they've been nourished from childhood, from birth to death, to take on certain roles, and within this overall plan. And that's what's happening to you and I, and whatever, as we integrate ourselves into the networks.
My father, he made me really angry a lot of times because he had all these corporations that just, you know, he funded and such. And I said, why do I have to work as a grease monkey? Why can't I go to work for Norfolk? Why can't I go to work here, Dad? Because he never let me fit into the norm. He didn't want me in anything that... I didn't even finish high school. He didn't want me educated by the system. And he wanted me to stay out of the system because he knew I had certain gifts, and he didn't want these contaminated. Now, children have imaginations. Those aren't imagination, those are gifts. And they get contaminated from within our society. So you're right. We're told to think within the box, and we do think within the box. And our system of schooling needs changed and educated. Not saying that we need Harry Potter. We don't need. By the way, I was born on Halloween, and my sister was born on Halloween 6 years later. And boy, did that mess me up as a kid. Let me tell you. And then my dad would show me the 2 X's in my hand, and he said, But it did teach me to use this, and if you use this and you exercise it, but don't go crazy on it. Don't start thinking that E.T. is going to come here and save us, because I don't believe he is. And my father's exact words were, and I hate to say this, but I'm just going to say it the way he said, "We're too rotten to save." That's the way he thought. And he here's a man that never said a cuss word, never laid a hand on me. I mean, he was too good for his own good, but yet he sees dead people in wars and such like that, and had tremendous mental abilities and such. And yet he sees, of course, maybe that's because he was a colonel and he military, and he saw the negative side of it. I hope he was wrong, but he also died under a lot of adversity. When my father passed away, we were being sued by the book. We got no money from the book. It was all stolen. And it was really a very bad time. So when I hear my dad say that, I consider the times that he said it. I don't think he really meant it. And how can you when he loved my 3 boys, and I'm sure he would want the best for them. And that's why the book was written, by the way. It even says that in The Day After Roswell. He felt that young people could handle it by knowing the truth. I got to tell you real quick about something. He would go into the Pentagon, and he says there was a room that they would go into like a jail cell. And he says you weren't allowed to take anything into the room. No paper, no pencils, nothing to record anything whatsoever. And you go in there, and you'd come out, whatever question you asked would be answered, and you'd come out with that question. And I asked him, was that E.T. in there? He never answered me. He would never say a word. I guess it was classified, so, a military man would not say anything. I thought it was E.T. in there. So I just brought that up real quick to let you know that maybe there was one in the Pentagon. I don't know. You think so? Okay. You hear him say that? Yeah. Well, he talked about it quite often. He talked about a lot of stuff that is not in the books. And what I hope to do is modify this book a little bit. Maybe a section in the back that I'm speaking of now of our conversations when I used to sit on the floor. How's our time doing?
10 minutes left.
10 minutes left, okay. What would you like to talk about?
Well, can I ask
Paula. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I was noticing her.
Okay. You had said that you actually connect into the planes and the computers and that they're pretty much alive.
Oh, yes.
What do you do with a car that just keeps breaking? I mean, I really am serious about this because...
Who owned it before you?
An ex-boyfriend.
Well, there you go. Get a new car.
Well, I'm selling it for him.
Pardon me?
I'm trying to sell it for him.
Good for you.
It keeps breaking.
Give it back to him.
He's not here on the island, so.
Okay.
But I'm just curious, is there a way that we
Are you serious?
I really am serious.
I'm sorry.
How you can connect with them to find out how to release some of that old energy or whatever?
I don't know. I worked for a company called Larry Smith Electronics, and I finally quit because I was so frustrated. Because every time I would go in to fix an autopilot, and I'd say, okay, I'm going to put the 183 IC in it, and I'd plug it in, and the thing would work. Always the same IC, and the odds are 1,000,000 to 1 that it's not the same IC each time. So I say, how do I write this up? So I would write it up. Do I have that ability? Yeah. I don't know where it comes from. It comes from my father. He did not have that ability. His was different, with photographic memory and such. But yes, I have that ability. So I don't know if you can do that, if you've learned to do that, So it's not something...
I'm intuitive, but I'm having the hardest time with this car.
Well, love it. It's hard for a woman to love a car. I guess they can. Polish it. I'm serious.
I did polish it.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not saying that every machine is alive. I'm just saying that there are people that have connections with machinery. And my connections are not with every machine. But when I build an airplane, it's definitely connected there. I don't want to turn it over to the owner. And when I do turn it over to the owner, he better treat it nice. We've taken many of our planes and resold, and I still keep in touch with them. They're my children. Yes, Paul.
Okay, what I wanted to say was that we really loved your dad in Italy, as you very well know. And before he died, he said that he would to leave a chair empty in the front row because he would always be present whenever we talked about disclosure. And I'm going to call it disclosure because that's a common term. And I'm glad you mentioned the reason why, because everybody thought he had different reasons. And as for someone to come close like that, he said it was for your boys and for the grandchildren to know exactly, and that they could handle it. What advice would you give to us, especially to us journalists who keep working on supporting your dad's testimony by bringing forth other people to support his testimony? Because obviously Colonel Corso's testimony was not enough.
Well, that's true. It's a collective effort, which you're doing a very good job of, Paula. You're one of the only, you might say, people in this field that I've ever met. I'm sure there's others, but I don't know everyone. But you're one of the ones that report and without an opinion. And I think that's very good, because if we keep that up, we can't get lost in crazy stuff. And that's up to each and every person here to weed out the crazy stuff. Because if you do, you're going to go out that branch of that tree and you're going to have to come back. And it's going to take too many years. We don't have that many years to go out this crazy stuff. But how do we keep I guess the essence of the question is how do we keep my dad's legacy alive? And what do we do to...
And how do we find the other people to come forth and support what he... Obviously, there were other people around him. He wasn't the only one.
Well, you have a gentleman sitting right there.
Yes, I know.
and I'm, it's magnificent. Because that age there, and I'm getting there. We have to do something. Time's running out, and it's running out quick. And how do you get them to come forward? You get them to come forward maybe with this book. Now, I'll tell you right now, my wife's going to whip me with this one. I don't need the money from this book. I'll give it all away. I'm just doing this for everyone. I hope it can bring 5 minutes. Okay. I hope it can bring some peace to the world. Now, Dr. Stephen Greer, he's looking for a new world. It's right in here. The technology that's in here, if we could only apply it. And I mean nuke plants that are as big as that table that run for 5 years unmanned in Alaska and produce water through reverse osmosis for 5 years without being touched. Now, we hear about the atomic bomb. Dad says in here, we are lost in the nuclear age because there's good nuclear stuff. He would go into rooms he speaks about and eat meat that's 5 years old. He and General Trudeau. And there's people starving in the world because of no refrigeration? Come on. In Switzerland, there's light bulbs that glow for the next 50,000 years. And they're bright enough to read by and go by. And they're not harmful, but yet they're tritium. So what has happened to us? Because we have an atomic bomb, we're going to kill all nuke away? No. He says it's wrong. We have it right here. Stephen Greer just doesn't know where to look, and I already told him that. Look here. That's all.
What you do is you connect innately with the molecules of your airplanes. You can talk to them. I talk to my car all the time. Beloved molecules of my car. I don't talk to the car. I talk to the individual parts. Beloved molecules. I thank you. I'm grateful for you traveling with me. I clear you of everything that does not need to be in this car. Thank you, molecules. And you can connect to any computer in this way. Start talking to your equipment. You too.
Well, yeah, machinery is wonderful, but it has a lifetime too, and we're going to replace it with new machinery and later technology, and this is going to keep happening. So we reach a point pretty soon that the technology is probably as smart as us. And that's one thing Dad says in the book, too. When he and General Trudeau released the first chip, they also said that they were afraid because they didn't know where that was going to take us or take over us. And they were smart enough at that time before they even knew really its limitations of what it possibly could do. So yeah, maybe evolution is a machine. Who knows? Yes, ma'am.
Well, on that note, I was wondering if you or your father or anyone you know of has any experience of anyone traveling here without a machine. And are any of your technologies being developed for us to travel without our bodies, without machinery?
I don't think so. But I don't know. That's a tough one. Sure. You know, you want to travel to the end of existence? You can do that in your mind instantaneously, you know, because you can visualize what it looks like. And there's nothing faster than thought. But I don't think that we know how to use it yet and harness it properly. Will it ever happen? Maybe. It's science fiction now, you know. But Dad also speaks in the book. Almost every question that's being asked tonight is in the book. And he also speaks of mental certain frequencies that he learned. And these frequencies are in the book. He talks about them, and he talks about interfacing with machinery. And it's been done for a long time because the EB did it, or the Roswell craft was an interfaced machine. It was I want to real quick. Time's up, isn't it? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Do you want to finish your thought?
No, I probably shouldn't. Okay, real quick. When Dad was dying, came back with a gallon of blood in his stomach on an airplane. Doctors said he'd be dead by the next morning. In walked Dr. Rowe. I'll say his name now. And he had a little machine. And the little machine opened up the chest. There were 3 other doctors involved and said he would be dead by the morning. Opened up his chest, put the little machine in there. There's no bleeding in the machine. Dad asked for the machine through Dr. Rowe. Pretty interesting. You know, I have my ideas of what the machine is and where it came from, but the good doctor down in Palm Beach has the machine still today. If you go to it, he'll probably deny it, but who knows? He said he got it in Russia. He picked it up in a shop in Russia. But he's also quit, Dr. Rowe, real quick, he quit his practice to do cloning that was led by my dad. Again, the typewriter coming in. Yes?
Hi. I just wanted to, engage you a little bit about, I thought I heard your comment that we would not be able to go to the future, that we're not able to go to the past. But in David Bohm's implicate and explicate order, we're enfolding and unfolding all the time. I mean, my understanding is 14 times a second. So if it's possible, with our mind, through remote mind, all I think that we really need is knowledge. And through that knowledge, if we have ideas of coordinates, ideas of potentials, ideas of realities, that would it not be possible with everything self-contained to this woman's idea about, we don't need external technology. I mean, from what you understand, could you see your way to that potential?
Well, first of all, why do you want to do that? See, again, benevolent. You have no business going back to the past, or me, or anybody like that, or going to the future, unless you have a purpose. Now, that's what time travel is. You cannot time travel without a benevolent purpose.
But what about just discovery?
Pardon me?
Just about discovery for the adventure.
No, you can't screw up the universe for discovery.
But I don't...
No, I'm sorry. See, I told you when I was at the table with these religious people, that's what the Air Force is bewildered with now. They thought they were hot shots and they're going to time travel all over the place. No. They're bewildered. They have no purpose for it. What's the purpose? To go back and take care of a country that, come on, to start a war? That's not a benevolent purpose. So you have to have a reason for it. You're going to correct something that was wrong back then. Possibly. I don't know. But I do know this, and Dad told me, the purpose has to be benevolent. So, if a meteor hits tomorrow, our planet, and destroys it, we would certainly have a reason to leave, wouldn't we? That's a benevolent reason. So that might be possible during a time like that. Just a quick example. Last one. Yes, sir.
Yes, Phil. My question is, the material in a book that you're going to have published, will it be the complete material, not unedited, all of the material that he has?
Yes. This book right now is in my dad's, well, some of it is typed, but most of it is in his original handwriting. His handwriting looks like a computer handwriting. It's printing. And it's in his original. And that's the way we want to do it, unedited. If I do anything, it'll be in the back of the book. And it'll say, big dummy me is saying these things. Not my father. So yes, we're going to leave this alone. Okay. And I don't know if it's ever been printed that way before, but maybe we'll photograph it just like it is. I think each one of you would probably enjoy reading just the way this sits. I was going to print up a chart back here, an intelligence officer's chart on the EB, and hand it out to you all. I'll try to, if we can find a printer, I'll do it tomorrow. And it just shows the logical of why the EB can travel in space and why we can't. And it goes through a chart of what we have, what they have, a comparison chart. I'll see if I can get it printed up for you guys and hand it out to you tomorrow.
Oh, that'd be great.
We want you to stay here a minute. We want to talk about your meteorite.
Okay.
We're actually not quite done yet with Phil, because Phil has made one other exceptional contribution to our conference. And you might have been wondering why we brought in a table over here on the stage and what we have sitting in that glass case. Well, it is an extraterrestrial object. It is a meteorite. And it's something very, very special. The energies that it brings to this conference gives all of us an opportunity to experience extraterrestrial right here, right now. And so this is a legacy, really, that Phil has offered to us for this conference and to be present for future conferences here in Hawaii, to offer everyone the opportunity to experience extraterrestrial firsthand. And so maybe Phil could tell us a little bit more about this meteorite and the significance of it.
It'd be a pleasure. Yes. Well, first of all, it began very negative. It came from demand from the White House that told me to shut up as a gift. So we're going to turn that around, okay? We're going to make it very positive. The unit itself, about 3 months ago, my middle son, the youngest son, Andrew, and he's mentioned in the book too. Isn't that weird tonight? Andrew wanted it. And I said, sure, you can have it. So he calls up, a little certificate comes with it. It's an 18-something and by some company, Meteorite and such like this, put it out, and did the machine work on it and such. And it's called a window mirror or something. That's the German scientist that first was able to turn them into the round object that way without breaking the meteorite. All the lines on it are strikes, it says, where it's been struck in space by other meteorites. And as it builds and builds and builds, those lines that are in it go through to the very beginning. There's a dot in the middle of it that's black. It's called a Gibbons. And it's supposed to be a rare earth element. Not element. It's a rare earth metal that's not found on this planet, so they tell me. It's only found in meteorites. So it's here, but in meteorites. Anyway, my son says that he wanted it. So he called the company. And the guy gets real upset with my son. And my son comes back and he says, Andrew says, Dad, he says we're not supposed to have this. It belongs in the museum. I said, well, give me the number. I'm going to call that guy. So I call him up, and he says, I'm going to sue you. He says, if you own such an object as that. You're not supposed to have it, he says. And besides, it's phony. He says, I never wrote that certificate and so on. I said, well, maybe I'll sue you then if you never wrote it, you know. So, end of conversation. But we'll turn it around. And that's basically why you all have it, because I want it to be unity. Maybe we can arrange for everybody to come and touch it. That seems to be the idea behind it, because if we all touch something from out there, and can you imagine if we only could have a video camera on that thing and see where it went for the last billion years? Wouldn't that be magnificent of its path and what it passed and what it traveled through, what planets, what scenes it's seen, what stars were born, what neutron energy is in it and such? It would be unbelievable. But I think as we touch it, maybe it will reveal its path to us. Thank you so much.
Just very quickly, I was going to do a little bit of a rundown on the results from the working group meeting, but I think because we stayed a little over time to listen to Phil Corso answer questions, maybe we can just delay that until tomorrow when we just before the panels begin, where I'll actually do the rundown on what's happened. But definitely there's something to report which is very positive. So go and enjoy your dinner.